My name is Margaret Lewis, and I am 72 years old. This is not just a memory. It is my life, told in my own words. When I was 35, my husband died suddenly. He was strong, full of dreams, and he promised we would grow old together, but fate decided otherwise. One cold evening, he collapsed, and just like that, I was left alone. Alone with 3 children, 3 hungry mouths, 3 young souls who looked up at me with fear in their eyes. David was 15 then, tall and quiet, trying to act like a man but still just a boy. Mark was 12, shy and thoughtful, never asking for much. Anna was only 8, my little girl, still clinging to my skirts, asking if Daddy would ever come back. I had no answer. There was no time for tears. Bills piled up on the table. The fridge was nearly empty. Winter was coming, and the children needed coats and shoes. That night, I whispered a vow to myself. I said, "No matter what, I will raise them. I will give them everything I never had." The next morning, I woke up before dawn and went to work. In the mornings, I scrubbed offices, wiping away dust while my body ached. In the afternoons, I served coffee and pie at a diner, smiling at strangers while my heart was heavy. At night, I collapsed on the couch, feet swollen, eyes burning. But I still sewed clothes out of old fabric and cooked soup out of bones to feed my children. Sometimes I slept only 3 hours. Sometimes I didn't sleep at all. But when I returned home and saw my children sleeping peacefully, I felt a flicker of hope. I bent over them, kissed their foreheads, and whispered, "Mommy's here. Don't worry. You will never go hungry." The house was tiny. The floor creaked, the roof leaked when it rained, and the paint peeled off the walls. But inside there was laughter. I told them stories at night, stories of kings and queens, of heroes who never gave up. And when I saw their eyes sparkle, I thought, perhaps we will survive this. Perhaps love will be enough. The years passed like a blur. Each day was a battle, but I carried their weight on my shoulders as if I were a soldier carrying wounded comrades. David grew taller, his shoulders broadening, his voice deepening. He helped me with chores, carried heavy bags, and sometimes stayed awake just to see if I was okay. Once he said to me, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of you one day." Those words were like medicine. They healed my tired heart. Mark, my quiet boy, grew steady and reliable. He was not one for many words, but he watched everything carefully. When a chair broke, he fixed it. When the faucet leaked, he found a way to stop it. Sometimes, when he saw me rubbing my aching back, he asked softly, "Are you okay, Mom?" He never asked for toys, never demanded treats. A simple smile from me was enough for him. And Anna, my little one, became the joy of the house. She sang while folding laundry. She laughed while sweeping the floor. She filled the silence with music. One evening, she hugged me tightly and said, "Mom, you're my hero. One day, I'll make you proud." I believed her. I believed all of them. The day David received his college acceptance letter, I cried. I stood by the university gates holding the paper, and I thought, yes, every sleepless night was worth it. When Mark got his first job at a company, I baked him a cake. The frosting was uneven, and the letters were crooked, but we laughed, and it felt like a feast. When Anna graduated high school, she wore a dress I had stitched with my own hands. It was simple, but she twirled in it and said, "It's beautiful, Mom." That night, as she walked across the stage, I felt my heart nearly burst with pride. I thought, now life will be easier. Now my children will stand by me as I stood by them. At first, life seemed perfect. My children married, built careers, and soon I held my grandchildren in my arms. Their tiny hands grasped my fingers. Their laughter filled the empty spaces in my heart. Weekends were joyful. My children came home bringing food, gifts, and stories. I cooked roast chicken, baked pies, and filled the table with dishes until it groaned under the weight. My house was once again alive with noise. I tucked my grandchildren into blankets when they fell asleep on the couch. Their small voices whispered, "Good night, Grandma." Those days were heaven, but slowly, the rhythm changed. Weekends became every other week, then once a month. The phone rang less often. Messages came later, shorter. One evening, I sat by the phone for hours, waiting for Anna. When it finally rang, I grabbed it eagerly. She said, "Mom, I'm busy. Maybe next week." Before I could even whisper, "I miss you," the line went dead. I sat in the silence, staring at the phone. The clock ticked loudly on the wall. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and tears rolled into my hair. I asked myself, what did I do wrong? Did I love them too much? Did I not love them enough? The house was quiet, too quiet, and I felt the first chill of loneliness creep into my bones. One afternoon, the air in the kitchen felt strangely thin. David came with a smile that seemed borrowed. He asked about my meals and my health. Then he leaned forward and said I should not live alone anymore. He said he had found a retirement home, a place with wide gardens, art classes, and friendly neighbors. He said I would never be lonely again. I stared at him, remembering how these walls had listened to every prayer, how the hallway still carried pencil marks from when he and his siblings measured their height. I asked him what would happen to this house, and he said calmly that a realtor had already visited. He said the market was good and it was the right time to sell. His words pressed against my chest. I asked how often he would visit if I left. He said every week, maybe more, and Anna would bring the children and Mark would come after work. He said life would be easier for everyone. His voice was smooth, but underneath I heard urgency, a pressure that did not belong to love but to necessity. When he left, a glossy brochure stayed behind on the table, full of blue skies and smiling faces. I sat there staring at it long after the door closed, feeling as though a stranger had walked in and quietly rearranged my future. In the days that followed, little clues appeared like cracks in plaster. A voicemail for David spoke of urgent balances. An envelope addressed in his name landed on my doorstep. When I asked him, he said everything was fine. He said work was complicated but manageable. And he said the market always came back if you waited. His smile was thin, his words rehearsed. Later, Anna phoned me. She said David was stressed, that he carried heavy worries, and that I should not take his impatience too personally. She said it was all temporary, that numbers could be cruel, but eventually they would soften. But another call came one evening, from a man looking for David. When I told him I was his mother, he apologized and said they would try again about the outstanding balance and the collateral documentation. Suddenly the room tilted. I understood then that my house, the one where birthdays and holidays lived in every corner, might already be written on a piece of paper where it was called not home, but asset. I confronted David gently. He said there had been setbacks. He said selling the house would fix everything, open doors that had been locked all year. He said I would not be losing but trading one kind of safety for another. I told him safety built from subtraction does not feel like safety, and he shook his head. Later, Anna called again and said maybe a smaller place for me would be nice, easier, more manageable. That night I walked from room to room, touching objects, as if they were animals I might have to release into a forest. The dented saucepan, the mirror that had memorized my face, the window where morning always sat first. I told the house I was not ready to turn it into numbers. In the silence that followed, I remembered David as a boy, saying he would take care of me. and I wondered if promises age like people do. Not breaking, just thinning, until one day you hold them to the light and can see through. After I said no, the house grew quieter in a new way. Not the gentle quiet of a nap, but the tight quiet of a held breath. Calls became shorter, visits postponed. Anna said her schedule had exploded with the children's rehearsals. Mark said work demanded endless late shifts. David said I did not trust him to make rational plans, that I was letting sentiment cloud essential decisions. At night, I stood by the kitchen sink with the light off, staring at the small square of backyard where summers had been filled with plastic pools and laughter. I thought about how silence can weigh more than furniture. 1 week later, I baked a cake for my granddaughter's birthday. I knew the party was across town late in the evening, and I might not be able to go, but I baked it anyway. When I called Anna, she said it would be complicated to bring me. She said they would send photos, and we would celebrate another time. I placed the cake on the counter, watching the frosting hold its brightness like a brave face. That night I sat at the table with the cake and a quiet fork, and told myself that love sometimes travels slowly through traffic. But the clock said otherwise, and the phone agreed. When I finally went to bed, I realized I was beginning to learn a new language. How absence speaks. The next morning I went out to the small park at the end of our street. I thought of my husband, who once said that houses keep people together because the walls are made of listening. I whispered to the air that I missed being someone's center, not out of vanity, but because it is warm there. A woman about my age sat down across from me with the careful smile of someone who knows strangers can be both risks and lifelines. We spoke of the weather, then families, then the quiet truths underneath. When I told her about my children and the suggestion that would not stop knocking, she listened. She said her name was Eleanor, and she said we are not finished simply because the world has turned another page. She said if company does not come to us, we can build it ourselves. She said a home is not a museum but a workshop where life keeps being assembled. I walked back carrying her words like a candle. For the first time in months, I felt the quiet might not be ending me, but clearing space for something new to begin. At first, I told myself the distance was temporary, a season of busyness that would pass. I waited by the window on Sundays, expecting to see Anna's car turning into the driveway, or David stepping up with groceries, or Mark waving with the children. But weeks folded into each other, and the visits slowed. When the phone rang, the voices were hurried. Anna said her children had too many rehearsals. David said he had urgent meetings. Mark said deadlines stretched late into the evening. Their words were thin bridges stretched over widening water. I tried to believe them. I said it was natural for grown children to be busy, that I should not cling. But each excuse left behind a silence that was longer than the last. Sometimes I cooked too much food, imagining they would arrive unannounced. I left the light on by the porch, hoping a familiar shadow might cross it. But the night swallowed the light, and the house remained empty. One evening, Anna called. She said she was sorry. She said next month would be calmer. She said she missed me. I clutched the phone, whispering that I missed her too. But even before the words left me, I heard her voice moving away, promising to call back soon. When the line went quiet, I stared at the wall and thought how strange it was to feel like a guest in the very family I had created. When my granddaughter's 7th birthday came, I prepared a gift. I wrapped a small doll in pink paper and tied it with ribbon. I imagined her smile, the way she would hold it close, the way she once held my hand. That morning I called Anna and asked what time the party was. She said it would be late in the evening. She said the rules at my place made it difficult for me to come. She said they would send pictures. Her words were careful, but they cut anyway. I sat holding the wrapped gift, thinking about other birthdays when the house was loud with balloons and cake, when children's voices filled every room. I remembered lighting candles and singing while little faces leaned forward to blow them out. Now, I sat alone with silence, watching the doll that would never be handed over. That night, I whispered an apology into the darkness. I said her name softly, telling her that I was sorry I could not be there. Tears blurred the candlelight on the counter. Memories pressed against me, her small arms around my neck, her voice calling me Grandma, her laughter running down the hall like a song. I thought, what is a birthday without a grandmother's presence? What is a life without being included in the small moments? The wrapped gift sat untouched, and it felt heavier than any box I had ever carried. As months drifted, the phone rang less. Sometimes days passed without a word. I found myself staring at the door, as if it might open on its own. I sat at the kitchen table with a teacup that cooled before I ever lifted it. At night, the silence became a companion I had never chosen. I walked through rooms and listened to the echo of my own footsteps. I remembered the promise David once made when he was a boy, that he would take care of me. I remembered Anna's words about making me proud. I remembered Mark's quiet loyalty. Promises that once wrapped me in warmth now slipped through my hands like smoke. One evening, Mark did call. He said he was sorry. He said work was endless. He said he thought of me often. His words floated across the line like feathers, too light to carry the weight of absence. I said I understood, but when the call ended, I placed the phone down slowly and let the silence gather again. I began to wonder if perhaps I had already disappeared in their eyes. Not physically, but as a center, as a priority. The absence was not only around me, it was inside me, growing roots. And one night, lying awake, I told myself that if nothing changed, I would have to change. That thought frightened me, yet it also stirred something I had not felt in a long time. Resolve. The day I met Eleanor in the park stayed with me. She sat across from me on a bench, and her smile was cautious but kind. We began talking about the weather, about the way seasons pass more quickly now. Then we spoke about family. I told her how my children seemed to drift away, how the house felt like a museum, how my son wanted me to move into a place that was not mine. She listened without interruption. When she finally spoke, she said, "We are not finished, simply because our children are grown." She said we are still alive, still capable, still worthy of choosing. She said that if love does not come to us, we can build our own circles of warmth. Her words were not loud, but they struck deep. For the first time in months, I felt a small fire in my chest. I walked home carrying her voice like a lantern. The walls seemed less heavy that evening, and the silence less cruel. I realized I had been waiting for someone to save me, when perhaps what I needed was to begin again. The decision grew slowly, like dawn, rising behind clouds. I began to write down the things that troubled me, each disappointment, each silence, each broken promise. At first, it felt bitter, but soon it became clarifying. Writing turned confusion into lines I could see and understand. I told myself that my house was not only wood and stone, but the vessel of my own endurance. I told myself I would not surrender it to numbers on a page. And I told myself I would create new life within it, even if my children visited less. One morning I stood before the mirror and whispered that I still had years ahead, that I could plant, paint, read, and meet others like Eleanor. I reminded myself that survival is not the same as living. I had survived for decades, but now I wanted to live. When my children did come again, they looked surprised to see me different. David asked if I was angry. I said no, I was awake. He said he wanted the best for me. I said the best would be to respect my choices. Anna said she was sorry she had been absent. I said sorrow was less important than showing up now. Mark said he admired my strength. I said strength grows when it is the only option left. We sat together at the table, and for a moment it felt almost like before. But I knew the balance had changed. I was no longer waiting to be the center. I was choosing to be whole, with or without them. That night, as the house settled into quiet, I thought of Eleanor's words. We are not finished. Our lives are still ours. And if no one brings us joy, we can plant it ourselves. To anyone listening, I say this: do not wait for permission to live. Family is precious, but so are you. Your years are not leftovers. They are chapters still to be written. Even when the world says you are near the end, remember, as long as you breathe, you are still at the beginning of something.